The space around Kepler Station burned with the light of 1,000 dying ships. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty's edge, watching as human vessels carved through the enemy lines like knives through paper. The Zephyrian Empire had come in force today, bringing 300 warships to crush the supply depot that fed the entire Outer Rim defense network. They had not expected to find humanity waiting for them. Enemy dreadnought closing on our starboard side. Commander Alex Turner called out from his station. His fingers danced across the control panel, jamming Zephyrian communications and turning their own weapons against them. Their shields are down to 30%. Morrison nodded and turned to Dr. Patricia Wells, who stood near the science station monitoring their quantum shield matrix. The technology she had developed made human ships nearly impossible to destroy. Energy weapons simply passed through the quantum barriers, while kinetic rounds were deflected into empty space. How are our shields holding up, Doctor? Perfect stability, Captain, Wells replied with a slight smile. The Zephyrians still haven't figured out how our defense system works. Their weapons are useless against us. The battle had been raging for 6 hours now, and the humans were winning decisively. Morrison's task force of 40 ships faced off against a Zephyrian fleet 3 times their size, but the aliens were losing badly. Human vessels moved with precision and grace, their adaptive tactics constantly evolving to counter enemy strategies. The self-repairing hull plating that Dr. Wells had also developed meant that human ships could take massive damage and keep fighting while alien vessels fell apart under similar punishment. Morrison watched through the main view screen as the USS Denver, a human destroyer, took direct hits from 3 Zephyrian cruisers simultaneously. The enemy beams struck the human ship's hull and seemed to do terrible damage. But within minutes, the smart metal was already flowing back into place, sealing breaches and restoring structural integrity. The Denver returned fire with its quantum torpedoes, and all 3 enemy cruisers exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Admiral Hayes is requesting a status report, Lieutenant Mary Collins announced from the communications station. The young officer had been monitoring transmissions from Earth Command throughout the battle, keeping their leadership informed of the victory. "Tell the Admiral that we're ahead of schedule," Morrison replied. "The Zephyrians are in full retreat. We should have Kepler Station secured within the hour." But something was bothering Morrison. Their alien allies had been acting strangely. Throughout the battle, the crystalline Vortani ships moved in perfect formation, but seemed to be avoiding direct engagement with the enemy. The insectoid Threxians were communicating on encrypted channels that excluded human forces. Most troubling of all, the energy-based Luminari had positioned their vessels in defensive formations that would allow them to retreat quickly if needed. "Commander Turner," Morrison said quietly, "are you picking up any unusual communications from our coalition partners?" Turner's expression darkened as he studied his displays. "Actually, yes, sir. There's a lot of encrypted chatter between the alien fleets. They're using quantum encryption protocols that we helped them develop, but they've locked us out of the communication network." Morrison felt a cold chill run down his spine. After 37 years of fighting alongside these species, why would they suddenly exclude humans from their battle communications? The Galactic Defense Coalition had always operated on principles of transparency and shared information. Human tactical innovations had saved alien lives countless times, and human manufacturing capabilities had supplied weapons and equipment to coalition forces throughout the galaxy. Dr. Wells looked up from her station with concern in her eyes. "Captain, I'm detecting massive power buildups in the coalition fleet formations. It looks like they're preparing to activate some kind of weapon system, but I can't identify what type." "Weapons targeting us?" Morrison asked. "No, sir. The energy signatures don't match anything in our database, but the power levels are enormous, far beyond anything needed for normal ship operations." Morrison was about to order a full scan of the coalition vessels when Lieutenant Collins suddenly gasped. "Captain, I'm receiving emergency transmissions from Admiral Hayes. She says we need to withdraw immediately. All human forces are ordered to retreat to minimum safe distance." Retreat? Morrison couldn't believe what he was hearing. "We're winning. This battle, the Zephyrians are almost completely defeated. Why would we retreat now?" Before Collins could respond, the main tactical display lit up with new contacts. Hundreds of coalition ships that had been holding back suddenly surged forward, but they weren't attacking the Zephyrians. They were moving to surround the human fleet. "What the hell are they doing?" Turner shouted as he tried to make sense of the sensor readings. "The Vortani are targeting our engines. The Threxians are jamming our communications. The Luminari are charging their main weapons." Morrison felt his world crashing down around him as the horrible truth became clear. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Coalition forces have turned hostile. Repeat, our allies are attacking us. All vessels implement emergency combat protocols and prepare for immediate withdrawal." The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as the crew tried to process what was happening. For 37 years, humans had fought and died alongside these species. They had shared technology, coordinated strategies, and built what they thought was an unbreakable alliance. Now those same allies were pointing weapons at human ships. "Incoming transmission from the Vortani flagship," Collins reported, her voice shaking with disbelief. "Put it through," Morrison ordered. The view screen flickered. To show Ambassador Christic, the Vortani leader whom Morrison had worked with for over a decade. The crystalline being's expression was cold and emotionless as he spoke. "Captain Morrison, by order of the Galactic Coalition Council, human forces are declared a threat to galactic security. You will surrender your vessels immediately or face destruction." "Christic, what are you talking about?" Morrison demanded. "We're your allies. We've been fighting together against the Zephyrians for decades." "That alliance has been terminated," Christic replied without emotion. "The Coalition has reached an agreement with the Zephyrian Empire. Humanity has become too dangerous and unpredictable to remain in this galaxy. Your species' rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion pose an unacceptable risk to galactic stability." Morrison stared at the screen in shock. "You're working with the Zephyrians? You've betrayed us to our enemies?" "We have made the logical choice," Christic said. "The Zephyrians have agreed to cease their expansion in exchange for the elimination of the human threat. Your people will be relocated to a distant galaxy where you can no longer interfere with civilized space." Turner suddenly looked up from his station with fury in his eyes. "Captain, I've broken into their encrypted communications. The betrayal was planned months ago. They've been feeding the Zephyrians information about our fleet positions, our technology, everything. This whole battle was a setup to get our entire fleet in one place." Morrison felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. His people were depending on him to get them out of this trap alive. "How many ships do we have in fighting condition?" 38 vessels operational, sir," Turner reported. "But we're surrounded by over 600 coalition ships. They outnumber us 15 to 1. Dr. Wells stepped forward with determination in her voice. "Captain, our quantum shields can protect us from their weapons, but only for a limited time. If we're going to escape, we need to move now." Morrison nodded and turned back to the view screen where Christic was still waiting. "You want to relocate humanity? Here's what I think of your relocation plan." He gestured to Turner, who immediately fired a spread of quantum torpedoes at the Vortani flagship. The alien ship's shields collapsed under the human weapons assault, and its crystalline hull began to crack and shatter. Christek's image disappeared as his ship spun out of control, leaking atmosphere and debris. "All ships, this is Morrison," the captain broadcast on all human frequencies. "Coalition forces have betrayed us to the enemy. We're fighting our way out of here. Follow my lead and stay together." The Liberty's Edge accelerated toward a gap in the enemy formation, its quantum shields absorbing the concentrated fire of dozens of alien vessels. Behind them, the rest of the human fleet formed up in tight formation, their superior coordination and technology allowing them to punch through lines that should have been impenetrable. But the odds were simply too great. Human ships began to fall under the massive firepower directed against them. The USS Phoenix took a direct hit from a Threxian plasma cannon and broke apart in a shower of metal and fire. The USS Colorado tried to cover the retreat of a damaged destroyer and was overwhelmed by luminary energy beams. Morrison watched in anguish as his people died around him, betrayed by the very allies they had trusted with their lives. The tactical display showed human ships winking out one by one as the coalition forces pressed their attack. 60% of the human fleet was already gone, and the survivors were taking heavy damage. "Jump coordinates locked in," Turner reported through gritted teeth. 6 months had passed since the betrayal at Kepler Station, and the galaxy had grown strangely quiet. The coalition species celebrated their victory over humanity, believing they had solved the human problem once and for all. Trade resumed between their worlds. Military forces were reduced to peacetime levels, and the three major species began dividing up human territory among themselves. They had no idea that they were being watched. Colonel Steve Parker crouched in the shadows of a Vortani supply depot on the edge of Coalition space, his stealth suit rendering him invisible to all known detection methods. Behind him, his team of 12 special operations soldiers waited for his signal. They had been observing this facility for 3 days, learning guard rotations and security protocols. Tonight they would strike. "All teams report ready," whispered Lieutenant Mary Collins through their quantum communication link. The young officer had proven herself during the escape from Kepler Station and now served as Parker's intelligence coordinator. Security shift change in 30 seconds. Parker watched through his enhanced visor as Vortani guards moved through their predictable patterns. The crystalline beings were efficient, but lacked the paranoia that came from actually facing a dangerous enemy. They had grown complacent during their years of dominance, never imagining that someone might dare to attack their installations. "Go," Parker commanded softly. His team moved like ghosts through the facility, their advanced technology allowing them to phase through walls and disable security systems without triggering alarms. Within minutes, they had reached the central data core, where Collins began downloading terabytes of information about coalition fleet movements, supply lines, and military capabilities. "Got it," Collins reported as she pulled her data spike from the Vortani computer system. "Complete tactical database, plus something interesting. They've been planning expansion into the Andromeda galaxy. Seems they think they'll need more space once they finish carving up human territory." Parker smiled grimly behind his helmet. The coalition species thought humanity was finished, but they had no idea what Admiral Hayes had been building in the hidden shipyards scattered throughout human space. While the aliens celebrated their victory, human engineers had been working around the clock to create something the galaxy had never seen before. The team withdrew as silently as they had entered, leaving no trace of their presence. The Vortani would never know their most sensitive data had been compromised until it was far too late. Similar operations were being conducted simultaneously across coalition space by dozens of human special forces teams, each one gathering intelligence and laying the groundwork for what was to come. Captain Jennifer Smith sat in the command chair of the Silent Thunder, watching her ship's sensor displays track a Threxian convoy moving through what they thought was secure space. The human reconnaissance vessel was completely undetectable, its revolutionary cloaking technology bending light and energy around the hull to create perfect invisibility. Convoy consists of 12 freighters escorted by 4 destroyers, reported her tactical officer. Manifest indicates they're carrying quantum processing cores to the Threxian homeworld. High-value technology that could be useful for our own purposes. Smith nodded as she studied the tactical situation. The Silent Thunder could easily destroy the entire convoy with its advanced weapons, but that wasn't their mission today. Admiral Hayes had been very clear about the strategy they were implementing. Random destruction would only alert the Coalition to humanity's presence. Instead, they needed to gather intelligence, steal technology, and gradually build up their capabilities while remaining invisible. Deploy the harvester drones, Smith ordered. I want those quantum cores, but make it look like a pirate attack. Use conventional weapons and leave some wreckage behind. The harvester drones were one of engineer Bob Mitchell's most brilliant creations. Small robotic vessels that could mimic the appearance and weapon signatures of known pirate groups, they allowed human forces to steal Coalition resources without revealing their true identity. The Threxians would blame the attack on criminals, rather than suspecting that humanity was behind it. The drones swept down on the convoy like a pack of wolves, their weapons fire carefully calibrated to match pirate technology. 2 freighters were destroyed outright, while the others surrendered their cargo to avoid annihilation. The Threxian escorts fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by superior tactics and firepower. Within an hour, the Silent Thunder's cargo bay was filled with stolen quantum cores, while the surviving Threxian ships limped away to report another pirate attack. Smith smiled as she reviewed the operation's success. The Coalition would never suspect that their own technology was being systematically harvested to build weapons that would eventually be used against them. Lieutenant Mary Collins stood before a holographic display in the command center of Sanctuary. Station, humanity's hidden base deep within an asteroid field that didn't appear on any Coalition star charts. The facility had been under construction for over 5 years, built in complete secrecy as Admiral Hayes prepared for the possibility of Coalition betrayal. Analysis is complete, Collins reported to the assembled human leadership. Coalition military strength has actually decreased since the betrayal. They've reduced their fleet sizes and pulled back from frontier positions, believing the threat is over. This gives us a significant tactical advantage. Admiral Hayes studied the intelligence. Reports with satisfaction. The Coalition's complacency was exactly what she had hoped for. What about their internal politics? Any signs of strain between the 3 major species? Increasing tensions, Collins replied with a slight smile. The Vortani believe they deserve the largest share of former human territory since they provided the most ships during the betrayal. The Threxians think their superior numbers entitle them to control the most systems. The Luminari want to claim all the energy-rich worlds for themselves. Perfect, Hayes said. Continue monitoring their communications and look for opportunities to exploit these divisions. I want them suspicious of each other when we begin the next phase. Collins nodded and activated another section of the display, showing the growing network of human allies throughout the galaxy. We've made contact with 47 species that have grievances against the Coalition. Most are minor powers that have been exploited or oppressed, but together they represent significant military potential. Engineer Bob Mitchell stepped forward with excitement in his voice. The weapon prototypes are ready for testing, Admiral. We've successfully reverse-engineered Zephyrian quantum core technology and integrated it with our own systems. The results are beyond anything we imagined possible. Hayes turned to the engineering display, where Mitchell showed off his latest creations. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space, weapons that could punch through any known shield system, and defensive technologies that made Coalition forces look primitive by comparison. The phase drive allows our ships to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, Mitchell explained. We can attack from parallel space where enemy weapons can't reach us, then shift back to normal space to deliver our own strikes. It's like fighting ghosts. Major Chris Evans, leader of Human Ground Forces, added his own report. The liberated populations are responding well to our training programs. We've armed and equipped resistance cells on over 200 coalition worlds. When you give the word, they'll be ready to cause massive disruption behind enemy lines. Hayes smiled as she looked around the room at her officers. 6 months ago, they had been a broken remnant fleeing from betrayal and defeat. Now they were the core of a military force that would soon shake the galaxy to its foundations. Gentlemen and ladies, she said formally, it's time to remind the Coalition why they feared us in the first place. Begin Phase 2 operations immediately. The orders went out across human space within hours. Special Forces teams that had been gathering intelligence began shifting to active sabotage missions. Hidden shipyards increased production to maximum capacity. Resistance cells on Coalition worlds received advanced weapons and began preparing for coordinated uprisings. Most importantly, the new phase-capable ships began their first combat missions. Captain Jennifer Smith took the Silent Thunder deep into Vortani space, where a major fleet base had been established on humanity's former colony world of New Geneva. Crystalline scum are using our own planet as a military headquarters, Smith's tactical officer reported with disgust. Over 50 ships in orbit, plus ground installations that probably hold 10,000 enemy troops. Smith studied the tactical display and smiled coldly. Not for much longer. Deploy all phase torpedoes and target their command ship. I want them to know that nowhere in Coalition space is safe anymore. The Silent Thunder phased into parallel space and approached the enemy fleet undetected. Coalition sensors couldn't track objects that existed in different dimensional frameworks, making human ships effectively invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Firing, reported the weapons officer. 6 phase torpedoes materialized inside the Vartani command. Ship's bridge, their quantum warheads detonating simultaneously and vaporizing the vessel's entire command structure. 1 year after the betrayal, the Coalition Council convened an emergency session aboard the massive Vortani command station orbiting their homeworld. The 3 species that had once celebrated humanity's defeat now faced a crisis that threatened their very existence. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy of mysterious attacks, vanishing ships, and coordinated rebellions that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Operation Cleansing will mobilize every available vessel, announced High Commander Vextral of the Threxian fleet. His insectoid features twitched with nervous energy as he addressed the assembled leaders. 2,000 ships from all 3 species will sweep human space sector by sector until we find and destroy the remaining forces. Crystal Ambassador Nithic shifted her translucent form in disagreement. The humans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond what we expected. They strike without warning and vanish before we can respond. How do we hunt an enemy we cannot see? Energy Lord Phaeton's form flickered with frustrated static. The rebellions across our territory are clearly coordinated by human agents. 57 worlds are now in open revolt, all equipped with advanced weapons that match human technology. Signatures. None of them realized that their supposedly secure communications were being monitored by human intelligence assets who had infiltrated their most classified systems months earlier. Lieutenant Mary Collins sat in the intelligence center of Sanctuary Station, watching the Coalition leaders plan their offensive with something approaching amusement. They still think we're hiding in human space, she reported to Admiral Paul Davis, who had recently taken overall command of military operations. They have no idea we've established bases throughout the galaxy using dimensional phase technology. Davis nodded as he studied the Coalition fleet deployments on his tactical display. The aliens were making exactly the mistakes he had hoped. For concentrating their forces in predictable patterns that would make them vulnerable to the kind of asymmetric warfare humans had perfected. "Let them come," he said quietly. "We'll give them something to find." 3 weeks later, the Coalition's massive fleet arrived in the Tau Ceti system, the last known location of human military forces. 2,000 alien warships spread out in search formations, their sensors probing every asteroid and moon for signs of enemy activity. They found exactly what Admiral Davis wanted them to find. "Contact," reported the Vartani fleet commander. "Multiple human ships detected in the outer asteroid belt. Energy signatures indicate at least 50 vessels attempting to hide among the rocks." High Commander Vextrel felt a surge of satisfaction as his forces moved to engage. Finally, they would crush the human remnants and end this troublesome rebellion once and for all. The Threxian battle fleet accelerated toward the asteroids, eager to complete what they had started at Kepler Station. But the human ships they detected were decoys, hollow shells broadcasting false energy signatures, while the real fleet waited in dimensional hiding. Captain Linda Brown watched from the bridge of the Ghost Wolf as the Coalition forces fell into the carefully prepared trap. "Enemy fleet is fully committed," reported her tactical officer. "All ships are focused on the decoy targets. Perfect positioning for dimensional assault." Brown smiled coldly. The Ghost Wolf was humanity's first stealth carrier, capable of deploying entire fighter wings that could attack from parallel dimensions. Her ship alone carried more firepower than most Coalition fleets, but it was completely invisible to their sensors. "Launch all fighters," she ordered. "Target their command ships first, and work your way down the priority list." 200 human fighters phased into existence around the Coalition fleet, their quantum weapons tearing through alien shields as if they didn't exist. The fighters had been designed using captured Zephyrian technology and improved with human engineering, making them superior to anything the Coalition could field. Vextrel watched in horror as his flagship's shields collapsed under weapons fire that seemed to come from empty space. Around him, Coalition ships began exploding as invisible attackers struck from multiple directions simultaneously. His carefully planned offensive was becoming a massacre. "All ships retreat," he broadcast frantically. "We're under attack by unknown forces. Repeat, retreat immediately." But Admiral Davis had planned for this moment carefully. As the Coalition fleet tried to withdraw, human ships began phasing into normal space around them, cutting off every escape route. The aliens found themselves trapped in a sphere of quantum fire that they could neither see nor escape. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Coalition's largest military fleet. Over 1,500 ships were destroyed, while the humans took no losses at all. The survivors who managed to escape carried terrifying reports of an enemy that could strike from nowhere and disappear, just as quickly. Major Chris Evans coordinated the ground war from his command post on the liberated world of Kepler Prime, where human-trained rebels had overthrown the Vortani occupation force 3 days earlier. Around him, communication screens showed the progress of similar uprisings across Coalition space. "Rebellion on Threx 7 has succeeded," reported one of his officers. "Local forces captured the planetary defense grid and are now holding off Coalition reinforcements. Luminary supply convoy destroyed near Rigel," announced another. "Our people got away with enough quantum cores to equip 5 more resistance cells." Evans studied the galactic map with satisfaction. The network of rebellions that humanity had spent months organizing was finally bearing fruit. Coalition forces found themselves fighting enemies on hundreds of worlds simultaneously, stretching their military capabilities beyond the breaking point. Dr. Nancy Wilson emerged from her laboratory with news that would change the war forever. The quantum physicist had been working with captured alien technology for months, and her latest breakthrough represented the ultimate evolution of human military science. The temporal displacement bombs are ready for field testing, she announced to Admiral Davis. "We can age enemy ships decades in seconds, causing them to fall apart from accelerated decay." Davis examined the weapon specifications with amazement. Wilson had found a way to manipulate time itself, creating localized fields that would make coalition vessels crumble to dust while leaving human ships untouched. It was the kind of devastating weapon that could end entire fleets with a single shot. "How many can you produce?" he asked. "Initial production run will be 50 weapons," Wilson replied. "Each one powerful enough to destroy a coalition battle group. But Admiral, I need to warn you about the psychological impact. These weapons don't just destroy ships, they erase them from existence as if they had never been built." Davis nodded grimly. The coalition had chosen to fight a war of extermination against humanity, and now they would face the consequences of that decision. "Begin mass production immediately. We're going to show them what real terror looks like." The first temporal displacement bombs were deployed during the Battle of Vega Station, where a coalition fleet of 200 ships had gathered to coordinate their response to the growing rebellions. Captain Linda Brown's Ghost Wolf approached the enemy formation cloaked in dimensional phase, carrying humanity's most terrible weapon. "Weapon armed and ready," reported her tactical officer. "Target locked on the enemy command formation. Fire." Brown ordered quietly. The temporal displacement bomb activated silently, creating a sphere of accelerated time around the coalition flagship and its escorts. The alien crews had just enough time to realize something was wrong before their ships began aging at an incredible rate. Hull plates corroded and cracked, electronic systems failed as their components decayed, and structural supports weakened until entire vessels simply fell apart. Within minutes, 20 coalition ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of ancient debris. The surviving alien commanders watched in horror as their most powerful vessels simply ceased to exist, destroyed by a force they couldn't understand or defend against. "What kind of weapon was that?" demanded one Vortani captain over. "The emergency frequency." "Unknown energy signature," replied a Threxian scientist. "It appears to manipulate temporal flow in localized areas." "I've never seen anything like it." The psychological impact was exactly what Admiral Davis had intended. Coalition forces began to panic when they realized they were facing an enemy with weapons that could erase them from existence. Morale collapsed as alien crews refused to engage targets that might be carrying temporal bombs. But the coalition's problems were only beginning. Colonel Steve Parker's Special Forces had infiltrated deep into enemy territory, establishing hidden bases that allowed human forces to strike at the heart of alien civilization. The three major species found their homeworlds under constant threat. From attackers who could appear anywhere without warning, the Threxian homeworld suffered the worst disruption when Parker's teams deployed quantum interference devices that disrupted their hive mind communications. Cut off from their collective consciousness, individual Threxians became confused and disoriented, unable to coordinate their defense efforts. "The insects are falling apart," Parker reported to Admiral Davis. "Without their mental network, they can't function as an organized military force. Their entire fleet structure is collapsing." 2 years after the betrayal at Kepler Station, the galaxy burned with the fires of rebellion and revenge. Fleet Admiral Kate Johnson stood on the command deck of her flagship, the Retribution, watching as human fleets emerged from dimensional phase across 36 star systems simultaneously. Operation Final Judgment had begun, and the coalition would not survive to see its end. "All fleet groups report ready, Admiral," announced her communications officer. "Phase drives are stable and temporal weapons are armed. We have 3,000 ships ready for immediate assault." Johnson nodded as she studied the massive holographic display showing coalition space. The enemy had pulled back to defend their core worlds, but their scattered forces would be no match for the coordinated assault humanity was about to unleash. The time for careful strikes and hidden warfare was over. Now came the reckoning. "Signal all groups," she ordered. "Begin simultaneous assault on all primary targets. Show them what happens when you betray humanity." Across the galaxy, human fleets phased into normal space around coalition strongholds that had thought themselves untouchable. The aliens had never imagined that anyone could coordinate attacks across such vast distances. But humanity's quantum communication networks made it possible to strike everywhere at once. General Mike Taylor led the ground assault on Vortani Prime, the crystalline homeworld where the betrayal had been planned. His Liberation Army troops descended from stealth transports that had infiltrated the system undetected, their advanced weapons and armor making them nearly invincible against coalition defenders. "Resistance is collapsing," Taylor reported as his forces swept through the crystal cities. "The Vortani are surrendering in massive numbers. They never expected us to reach their homeworld." The Vortani had built their entire civilization around the belief that their superior technology and strategic alliances made them untouchable. They had never prepared for the possibility that an enemy might actually invade their core systems. Now they watched in terror as human soldiers moved through their cities like unstoppable machines of war. Taylor's troops were equipped with quantum phase armor that made them immune to Vortani crystal weapons. Their own firearms used temporal acceleration technology that aged enemy defenses into uselessness before they could fire. Entire defensive positions simply crumbled away as human forces advanced with mechanical precision. "Civilian evacuation centers have been secured," reported Colonel Steve Parker, who was coordinating special operations across the planet. "We're finding massive evidence of war crimes. The Vortani have been enslaving entire species and using them for forced labor." Taylor's expression hardened as he reviewed the intelligence reports. Vast underground complexes filled with alien slaves who had been worked to death in Vortani crystal mines. Entire species that had been reduced to genetic material for Vortani. Biological experiments. The Coalition's crimes went far beyond simple betrayal. "Document everything," Taylor ordered. "The galaxy needs to see what these monsters have been doing while pretending to be civilized." Meanwhile, Commander Lisa Turner led the space battle for control of Threxian space aboard her dreadnought Retribution. The insectoid aliens had assembled, their largest fleet ever to defend their homeworld, but they were fighting an enemy that had evolved far beyond their understanding. "Enemy fleet consists of 800 vessels," reported her tactical officer. "They're using swarm tactics and trying to overwhelm us with numbers." Turner smiled grimly. The Threxians still thought they were fighting the same humans who had fled from Kepler Station 2 years ago. They had no idea how much humanity had changed during their time in the shadows. "Deploy temporal displacement bombs," she ordered. "Target their command ships first." The Threxian fleet formation began dissolving as their capital ships aged decades in seconds and fell apart from accelerated decay. The smaller vessels tried to maintain formation, but without central coordination, they became easy targets for human quantum torpedoes. "Enemy morale is breaking," Turner observed as Threxian ships began fleeing in all directions. "They can't comprehend weapons that can erase them from existence." But the Threxians' problems were just beginning. Professor Sam Miller had developed a new class of weapons specifically designed to target their hive mind biology. Psychic disruption bombs that could sever the mental connections between individual insects, turning their organized swarms into confused mobs. "Deploying neural cascade weapons," reported Turner's science officer, "targeting the enemy flagship's command cluster." The psychic bomb exploded in a burst of quantum energy that tore through the Threxian hive mind like acid through flesh. Across their entire fleet, individual insects suddenly found themselves cut off from the collective consciousness that had guided them since birth. Ships began drifting helplessly as their crews struggled to function as separate beings for the first time in their lives. The third prong of humanity's assault targeted the Luminari, homeworld where beings of pure energy had thought themselves safe from physical attack. Captain Jennifer Smith led a specialized fleet equipped with dimensional manipulation technology that could trap energy-based life forms in quantum containment fields. "Dark matter projectors are online," reported her weapons officer. "We can begin containment operations on your command." Smith studied the tactical display showing thousands of Luminari flowing around their homeworld like living aurora. They had dismissed humanity as a primitive species, limited by physical matter, never imagining that humans could develop weapons that affected pure energy. "Fire," she ordered. Dark matter containment fields began forming around clusters of Luminari, trapping them in quantum prisons where they slowly weakened and faded. The energy beings found themselves unable to escape the specialized technology. That turned their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. "They're trying to communicate," reported the communications officer. "The Luminari are offering to surrender." Smith's expression remained cold. Too late for that. They had their chance to coexist peacefully. They chose betrayal instead. Back on Earth, Admiral Paul Davis coordinated the massive military operation from the rebuilt command center that had once monitored the Coalition Alliance. Now it served as the nerve center for humanity's campaign of total war against their former partners. "Casualty reports coming in," announced Lieutenant Mary Collins, who had been promoted to as Chief Intelligence Officer. "Coalition military forces have lost 80% of their operational strength. Their command structure is completely shattered." Davis nodded with satisfaction. The aliens had made the fatal mistake of believing that humans would fight according to their rules. Instead, humanity had adapted and evolved, becoming something the Coalition couldn't comprehend or defeat. "What about their civilian populations?" he asked. "Mass surrenders on over 300 worlds," Collins replied. "Most alien civilians prefer human occupation to their own governments. They're discovering that we treat prisoners better than the Coalition treated its own citizens." It was true. As human forces liberated Coalition worlds, they found evidence of systematic oppression and exploitation that went back centuries. The three major species had built their civilization on the suffering of countless smaller races, using them as slave labor and experimental subjects. The liberated populations welcomed human forces as genuine liberators rather than conquerors. They provided crucial intelligence about Coalition atrocities and eagerly joined the human-led alliance that was forming from the ashes of the old order. Engineer Bob Mitchell emerged from his laboratory with news that would ensure humanity's permanent dominance over the galaxy. "The stellar manipulation weapons are ready for deployment," he announced. "We can cause stars to go nova or collapse into black holes on command." Davis examined the weapon specifications with awe. Mitchell had somehow learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that held stars together, giving humanity the power to destroy entire solar systems if necessary. It was the ultimate deterrent against any future threats. "How many species know about these capabilities?" Davis asked. "Only us," Mitchell replied. "And now any Coalition survivors who refuse to surrender will face the choice between submission and annihilation." The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. When news of humanity's stellar weapons reached the remaining Coalition forces, mass surrenders began occurring across the galaxy. No species was willing to face the possibility of having their home star destroyed. The Vortani Council formally surrendered after General Taylor's forces captured their capital city and documented their extensive war crimes. The crystalline beings found themselves facing trial for crimes against sentience, with billions of liberated slaves testifying against their former masters. The Threxian Queen attempted to negotiate terms, But humanity was no longer interested in half measures. Commander Turner's fleet surrounded the insectoid homeworld and delivered an ultimatum: unconditional surrender or complete extinction. The Luminari tried to flee to distant galaxies, but Captain Smith's interdiction fleets were waiting for them. The energy beings discovered that human technology could track them across any distance and prevent their escape to other dimensions. Within 6 months, all 3 coalition species had surrendered unconditionally. 3 years had passed since the coalition's unconditional surrender, and the galaxy looked nothing like it had during the old regime. President Sarah Mitchell stood before the assembled representatives of 400 species in the Great Hall of New Geneva, the rebuilt human colony that now served as the capital of the Terran hegemony. The formal ceremony marking the end of the war was about to begin. Today we witness the final surrender of the coalition leadership, Mitchell announced to the gathering. Let this moment mark not just the end of conflict, but the beginning of a new era of justice and prosperity for all sentient beings. In the holding area beneath the hall, the 3 former coalition leaders waited under heavy guard. Ambassador Christic of the Vortani had aged terribly during his imprisonment, his crystalline form cracked and dulled. High Commander Vextral's insectoid features twitched nervously as he contemplated his species' fall from power. Energy Lord Phazon flickered weakly, his form barely maintaining coherence. Admiral Dan Cooper, the new Chief of Galactic Defense Forces, escorted the prisoners into the hall, where representatives from across the galaxy waited to witness their final humiliation. The beings who had once ruled through fear and oppression now stood as broken reminders of what happened to those who betrayed humanity. The charges against you are clear, President Mitchell continued. Conspiracy to commit genocide against humanity, crimes against sentience involving the enslavement and extermination of numerous species, violations of the most basic principles of civilized behavior. Christic stepped forward with what remained of his dignity. We surrender unconditionally and place ourselves at the mercy of the Terran hegemony. Our species accept responsibility for our actions and will abide by whatever judgment you impose. Mitchell nodded coldly. The coalition leaders had fought until the very end, only surrendering when faced with the complete destruction of their civilizations. Now they would face justice for crimes that stretched back centuries. The tribunal has reached its verdict, she announced. The 3 coalition species will be placed under permanent human supervision. Your military forces are disbanded forever. Your governments are dissolved. Your populations will be relocated to designated worlds, where you will spend generations proving your commitment to peaceful coexistence. It was a sentence that most of the galaxy considered merciful. Given the scope of coalition atrocities, many liberated species had called for complete extermination. But humanity had chosen rehabilitation over revenge, believing that even the worst criminals could eventually be reformed. Ambassador Helen Davis, who led diplomatic efforts with the hundreds of species liberated from coalition rule, stepped forward to address the assembly. The Galactic Liberation Charter is now in effect across all hegemony territory. Every sentient being has the right to life, liberty, and self-determination. No species will ever again be allowed to enslave or oppress another. The Charter represented everything the coalition had stood against. Where the aliens had practiced exploitation and dominance, humanity offered protection and equality. The liberated species found themselves with rights and freedoms they had never dreamed possible under the old regime. Director Tom Anderson, head of the Reconstruction Authority, provided an update on the massive effort to rebuild galactic civilization. 2,000 worlds have been liberated from coalition control. 30 billion sentient beings have been freed from slavery or oppression. Industrial production has increased by 400% as former slave populations become productive. Citizens, the transformation had been remarkable. Under coalition rule, most species had been forced to provide resources and labor to their alien masters while receiving nothing in return. Under human administration, they found themselves partners in a galactic economy that benefited everyone. The ceremony concluded with representatives from each liberated species signing the Galactic Peace Accords, formally establishing the Terran hegemony as the legitimate government of civilized space. It was a moment that marked humanity's complete transformation from betrayed allies to galactic rulers. After the ceremony, President Mitchell met privately with her senior advisors to discuss the challenges that lay ahead. Building a new galactic order was proving more complex than winning the war had been. Not everyone is happy with human leadership, reported Admiral Cooper. Some of the more powerful liberated species think they should have more say in galactic governance. They're grateful for liberation, but resent being ruled by humans. Mitchell understood their concerns. Many of these species had been spacefaring civilizations long before humans had left Earth, and it was natural for them to chafe under human authority. But the brutal lessons of the Coalition's betrayal had taught humanity to never again trust their safety to others. They can have local autonomy, she decided, but military forces and interstellar policy remain under human control. We've seen what happens when aliens are allowed to coordinate against us. Ambassador Davis added her own perspective. The younger generation is adapting well to human leadership. It's the older aliens who remember the Coalition era that are causing problems. Time will solve most of these issues. Director Anderson brought up a more immediate concern. The former Coalition worlds are proving difficult to manage. Their populations have been indoctrinated for centuries to believe in their species' superiority. Many refuse to accept that humans now rule the galaxy. Mitchell frowned. The three major Coalition species represented over 1 trillion individuals who needed to be integrated into the new galactic order. Most were adapting to their changed circumstances, but significant minorities remained hostile to human authority. Increase surveillance and security measures, she ordered. Anyone who cannot accept the new reality will be relocated to more isolated colonies. We cannot allow Coalition sympathizers to destabilize the peace we've worked so hard to achieve. The meeting was interrupted by urgent news from the frontier. Captain Jennifer Smith, now commanding the exploration vessel Discovery, had encountered something unexpected in the outer reaches of former Coalition space. Message from Captain Smith, announced the communications officer. She's discovered a previously unknown alien civilization beyond the galactic rim. They call themselves the Helix Consortium, and they're requesting formal contact with the Terran hegemony. Mitchell exchanged concerned glances with her advisors. First contact with new species had become a critical test of humanity's leadership. The galaxy was watching to see if humans would prove different from their predecessors. Order Captain Smith to proceed with standard first contact protocols, Mitchell decided. Full diplomatic team, complete cultural analysis, and strict rules of engagement. We'll show the galaxy that humanity can be trusted with power. The Helix Consortium proved to be a federation of 12 species that had remained hidden during the Coalition era, fearful of being enslaved or exterminated. They had watched humanity's rise to power with cautious interest, hoping that the new galactic rulers would prove more benevolent than the old. Captain Smith's diplomatic mission was a complete success. The Helix species agreed to join the Terran hegemony in exchange for protection and full rights under the Galactic Liberation Charter. It was exactly the kind of peaceful expansion that demonstrated humanity's commitment to justice rather than conquest. 10 years after the betrayal at Kepler Station, the galaxy had been completely transformed. The Terran hegemony encompassed over 5,000 inhabited worlds and protected the rights of more than 1 trillion sentient beings. Trade and prosperity flourished under human protection, while conflicts between species were resolved through diplomacy rather than warfare. Admiral Jake Morrison, now elderly but still sharp, visited the memorial built at Kepler Station to honor those who had died in the Coalition's betrayal. The site had been transformed into a shrine dedicated to the principle that betrayal would never be forgotten or forgiven. They thought they were eliminating a threat, Morrison reflected as he stood before the monument listing the names of fallen humans. Instead, they created the force that would reshape the entire galaxy. President Mitchell, now in her second term, delivered her annual address to the Galactic Assembly on the anniversary of the Coalition surrender. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to hear her words, all of them aware that their freedom depended on continued human protection. 10 years ago, our former allies betrayed us in our darkest hour, she began. They thought they could eliminate humanity and divide our territory among themselves. They were wrong. Their betrayal taught us that power without justice is tyranny. A justice without power is meaningless. The assembly listened in respectful silence as she continued. We learned both lessons the hard way, and we will ensure that the galaxy never forgets them. The Terran hegemony exists not to dominate other species, but to protect them from the kind of exploitation that characterized the Coalition era. In the years since the war's end, humanity had proven its commitment to just governance. Former Coalition territories prospered under human administration, while liberated species enjoyed freedoms they had never known under alien rule. The galaxy had become a safer and more prosperous place under human leadership.